Okay, so what we're doing today is talking about predictive techniques, solar arc, progressions, perfections, transits, and also we'll talk about what's coming up in 2019 using those techniques and stuff. We have a few people joining us today who use predictive techniques in readings, etc. And so we're going to have them spend some time talking about their methods and how they go about things. So Sue, can you hear me? Can everyone else hear me? I'm guessing we're good. I'm just getting from Sue that she can't. Anyway, so let's start this out. Great, thanks, Leonie. Zeynep, you were the first one to volunteer to talk a little bit about predictive techniques. So I'm going to unmute you and open up my screen with your slideshow. Are you there, Zeynep?
Yes, do you hear me?
I do hear you now. And can everyone else hear Zeynep? Great, excellent. So everyone can hear you. I'm going to open up, I'm going to share my screen here. Give me a second. Like this to run smoothly. Oh boy. Bear with me, everyone. My apologies. Okay, let's see here. Okay. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's open up PowerPoint. Can everyone see my PowerPoint here?
I see.
Great. All right, I'm getting a couple of new people. All right, Zeynep. So let's have you take the stage here. I think everybody else should be able to see you and your little corner video there.
Yes.
Okay. So just let me know when you want me to switch slides, okay?
Okay.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Today, I want to talk with you the most widespread Time Lord technique in the Hellenistic tradition. It's annual perfection, and the basic premise underlying the Time Lord technique is that not all placements in a person's birth chart are activated at all times. Instead, certain placements lie dormant during the course of a person's life until they become awakened as Time Lords. Yes, we can go to the next slide, please. Yes. When the annual perfection comes to a specific place in a chart, the topics associated with that place become activated during the course of that year. If the perfection comes, for example, to the 7th place, then relationships would become part of the focus of the year. And now we will talk how to perfect. There are annual perfections, monthly perfections, and daily perfections. For the annual perfections, we perfect one house sign per year. It is very simple. Beginning with the rising sign, the ascendant, we count one sign per year from that sign. in zodiacal order for every year. For example, when you are 12 years old, first house perfection. And when you are 24, again, it's first house perfection. And when you are 25, it is second house perfection. It goes one sign for each year. And for the monthly perfections, for example, when you were born on 5th of October, then and you are at age 36, 5th of November, 1 month later, you go to the next house, the second house. And it goes in that order. We can go to the next slide, please. Yes. And what to look for in the annual perfections. First, we should look at the house topic. Which house is activated that year? Second house, money issues, seventh house, relationships, etc. And benefic or malefic planets in the house. So when a benefic planet in that house, it will be an easier year. But if a malefic planet in that house, it will be a harder time, of course. And the Lord of the annular perfected house and its nature, location, and condition. Yes, when a house is perfected, then the Lord of that house is our Lord of the year, and its nature, location, and condition is important. And transits through the house. I look at with whole sign house system, as in Hellenistic tradition we use whole sign mostly. So one house per year, and when we come to the perfected house or sign in another sense, then transits through the house is also very important. We will also look at an example later, and we can go to the next slide, please. Yes, and how to combine annual perfection with solar return. Of course, you can use solar return as a standalone wheel, but it's better use a B wheel with either natal in center or solar return in center. We need to make a B wheel to see the natal and solar return at the same time. And I give special attention to solar return position of the annual perfected Time Lord. In which house in the solar return? And is the Time Lord in better or worse condition than in natal?
Zainab, do you mind if I just pause you just for a second? And I just want to make sure that everybody's kind of following along with you okay? And if anyone has any questions at this point, maybe they can ask those questions. If you want to unmute yourself, if anyone has any questions. So far, it seems it's great. One person's commented. This is perfection is an interesting method that not everyone uses, and the Hellenistic tradition is definitely not necessarily as common in Western astrology, but very interesting, and just wanted to make sure everybody was on board with where you're heading here. Bear River wants to know, what is a Time Lord?
Time Lord is the ruler of the perfected house, in another sense, sign. We will do an example for that, and it will be more clear, I think.
Okay. And Sue asks, I understand it's the house for the year of life, but what is the chart? And maybe she can wait for your example as well to kind of.
I think it will be more clear.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll move things along here because there's a couple other people that wanted to talk as well. So.
Simple. Beginning with the rising sign, just count one sign per year from that sign in zodiacal order for every year. It's so simple.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We can move to the next slide, please. Yes. Which natal house solar return ascendant falls? It's also very important. And we should also see if any solar return planets make close conjunctions to natal planets. So that's why we do BVL to see these conjunctions between the solar return and the natal chart. And transits by the annual perfected Time Lord to other planets, as well as transits to the annual perfected Time Lord by other planets, are also important. And yes, we can move to the other slide for our example. Yes, I choose this topic because it's very popular now, you know, and we all watch on TV, and we want to know what's going on, and in the following days, what will happen. Is it going worse or what will happen? Protests in France against President Macron's controversial fuel tax started on 17th of November. And yesterday, it was at the top of the protests. And now we will look at the chart of France transits and solar return chart for France. And there are many charts for France. First Republic chart, second, third, fourth, fifth Republic chart. But in the following example, I use the chart mentioned in Nicolas Campion's book of World Horoscopes, and also used by Liz Green. And this is the first ceremonial moment of the new republic occurred when the state seal was affixed to the constitution at approximately 6:30 p.m. on 6th of October 1958. Yes, 1958, and now we are in 2018, and 60th birthday, 60 years. So it is the first house perfection for France. Very important perfection year, as it is first perfected year, and Aries rising in the chart of France. As Aries is rising, the Lord of Aries is Mars, and it is in the third house in Gemini, as you see in the circle. Yes, so our Lord of the year is Mars. And you know, this protests started because of the fuel taxes of the cars. And third house is very related with, you know, transportation. And Mars is there, a malefic planet. And when the outer wheel is the day protests started. It is November 17th of November, yes. And this state, transiting Mars, was making a square from the 12th house to the 3rd house. Transiting Mars was making a square to natal Mars, as you see in the chart. Mars, transiting Mars was in Pisces. And this also triggered, activated that at that time, because it transits to the perfected house lord is very important. And can we move to the next slide, please? Yes. Inner wheel is solar return of France. Outer wheel is natal chart of France. And I also put numbers in red color inside to make it more clear for you. And in the solar return chart, you see Mars is in Aquarius in the 4th house. And Mars in Aquarius is an independent spirit, fighting for or against unconventionality, uncontrollable and independent, fight battles for the group. And many people in groups are protesting this fuel taxes. When Mars is in Aquarius, as you know, anger can be aroused by perceived injustices and unfair practices. And people see this very unfair, this taxes. And many people suffered by various members of society. And yes, and it's when we look at the perfected house, it is in the 6th house of the solar return chart, and 8th house is rising. Again, taxes. Taxes are related with 8th house matters, as you know, and it's Scorpio. When it's Scorpio rising, it's not an easy year, you know. And when we look this way, in solar return, 8th house is natal 3rd house. So again, there's some relation with transportation and taxes. And of course, there are many other factors in the solar return chart. Pluto and Moon conjunction between solar and natal, and MC and Uranus, and people's movement and independence, fighting for injustices is natal Uranus and solar return MC also conjunct. And this is not an easy year for Macron. And Sun is associated with the leader of the country, and Sun is in the 12th house. Of course, I look with whole sign. You may look at another house system, but when we practice Hellenistic techniques, it's better to use whole sign. But I use outer planets. Some Hellenistic astrologers avoid to use outer planets like Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. No, I use them, but I look by whole sign and I don't use modern rulerships. For example, for Aquarius, I use Saturn as ruler, not Uranus. And we can, I look again. Yes, we can move to the next slide, please. Yes. In this chart, inner is solar return of France. Outer wheel is the transit for protests, the day of the protests. And yes. I think we can look by this way. Okay, can we move back for after the photo, the color photo, the protests? Yeah.
The first one.
Yes, it's okay. Yeah. I think the hardest time for France will be when the transiting Mars. Transiting Mars is now at 13 or 14 degrees of Pisces. But when the transiting Mars moved to the areas, the profected house, it can be a harder time for France. And when we calculated, for example, 6th of October, on the 6th of October, profected sign activated. Then 6th of November, second house activated. 6th of December, third house will be activated. And what is in the third house? Mars. So from the 6th of December, something not going for better, I think, something going for worse. Because this house will be activated, the third house, in which Mars is, on the 6th of December, when we count by one house per month. And when the transiting Mars is also moving into areas, I think people's protests may go further. And transiting Uranus also moved to areas a short period ago, before the protests started. This also activated this energy in the first house. All the transits from the profected sign and house are very important. And we should also look at the profected house lord, Mars in this example, and transits to that planet are also important times. And do you have any questions? Was it clear for you? If you want to ask questions, please do not hesitate to ask.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to unmute themselves to ask a question, that's fine too. It moves things along a little quicker.
I will be also speaking about perfections and solar returns at the next AA conference in Boston.
And where is Boston, Zainab? Where is Boston?
Astrological Association's conference next June in Boston. I will be speaking about perfections and solar returns again. Okay,
great. Well, thank you very much. That was a very interesting presentation, and I think everyone appreciates this perspective.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Christos, are you present today? I'm not sure I saw you on the participant list. Does anyone, would anyone like to have a moment to talk about the way they go about their predictive techniques? Um, Happy to open up this discussion.
Sure, it's Jeannie.
Hi, Jeannie.
Um, I just wanted to just talk a little bit about predictive techniques and about predictions. Some of the I guess some of the not necessarily rules, but some of the things to just be aware of when doing predictions. When we do predictions, I use predictions in my chart, and when I do consults with people. And one of the key things is you really do need to understand what the birth chart is before you do any predictions. If there isn't a birth promise, then a specific, no matter how much you want that to happen, or a transit is happening, or a progression that might instill some greatness, if that greatness isn't shown in a birth chart in itself, it's not going to be realized. Or if there is an affliction, or there is an issue in the birth chart where the person has to work through something, it has to unfold, and as an opportunity comes forward, then this might actually be an opportunity for them to unfold a little bit more. For example, if you suppose a birth chart indicates fear of commitment, and every prediction tool indicates that a once-in-a-lifetime period for starting a lasting relationship is approaching, if the person has not yet dealt with that fear of commitment, a positive predictive indications are unlikely to come out as an outcome of that trait. So, when you have to understand what the birth chart is, where the person is in their unfoldment of their birth promise, and then as the prediction comes in, it only indicates that there is a possibility or an energy that is providing that opportunity. Is that clear, Jeff?
That is clear, Jeannie. It's very interesting. It's basically, we're only going to be able to grow as much as we can grow on our own, and whenever opportunities arise, if we haven't grown to the point where we can, be able to manifest whatever opportunities arise, then they won't arise. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly true. And if we are not at a point within our development, or our evolving within our birth chart, when a certain situation presents itself, even if it is a great situation, if it is a great prediction, if we are not ready for it, depending on how we can handle that situation, we might regress as opposed to move forward. And I mean, there is a multitude of predictive tools, as Zainab had indicated. The perfections is one, but there's also progressions, which is solar arc, secondary, tertiary. There's returns, solar and lunar returns. Transits show, especially with the outer planets, or even inner planet transits. If you're looking, somebody comes to you and says, I want to change jobs. Is this a good time? Well, I certainly would look to see, number one, what's Mars doing and what's Venus doing in the person's chart as it's transiting. Is it activating something, or is it might cause issues? They should wait maybe for a couple of months before they make that move. Or Saturn. There's also eclipses. Was there something that was ignited at an eclipse that is now starting to take effect? Horary is also a great tool, and the lunar nodes and returns. I mean, there's just a lot of different techniques that can be used, and it's important that you find the one that is most comfortable with you, and possibly use a couple to when you do your your vision going forward and seeing when the influences are going to be the best or the worst or whatever. Is that clear? Are there any questions about that at all?
Anyone? I'm hoping that everyone is capable of unmuting themselves if they do have a question. I think I set it up so that was possible. Jeannie, you unmuted yourself, right?
I did, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions or I'm sure there are more than just Zeynep and Jeannie in here that work with predictive techniques. I'm sure there's plenty of us in here that might do that. So, any questions, any comments, any further insights? This is a very useful tool for our practice as professionals and students alike.
You have Donald Trump's chart up there.
I do. I actually generated Trump's transits, solar arc, progressed, and perfected in case Zeynep, we were going to get there with her. And I also did George Bush Sr.'s death time for all three as well. So I thought maybe we could at least put these up. I decided to look at Trump's chart for when the North Node, hopefully everyone can see me here, when the North Node transits his Saturn in the 11th. I have a feeling that'll be a very interesting time, not to mention the fact that transiting Pluto will be on his South Node at that time. So, just that right there is a very indicative red flag for, quite a bit of change, rebuilding of structures, tearing down of structures, et cetera. So, if anyone, Jeannie, what would you say about that transit there?
Well, Trump has had an interesting chart. So I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. He had, at the very beginning of his tenure, there was the solar return right on his ascendant, right? Mm. And there was a lot of prediction that there was going to be, a usurping of power. He was going to get indicted. He would be out of power. And none of that has come to pass. He has been investigated. That's about as far as it has gotten. But with that node on Saturn, and it's exact, I mean, how close can you get? He's always had that access. And I think that throughout his whole life, his Saturn in Cancer in that 11th house is what saves him. That's where his bluster comes from as well. He comes out and people listen to him, the Cancer, the nurturing. It doesn't matter what's happening behind the scenes. He can spew whatever he wants, or he can say whatever he wants, but he seems to instill trust in the masses. With this North Node coming across that Saturn, I'm wondering how this is going to present in the United States. Is there going to be a bit of a division? Because this is going to say, okay, put your money where your mouth is, prove to us what you're saying is true. This is where how I see the North Node reacting in a person's chart when it's transiting. It comes in and the South Node is more introspective, but the North Node is, okay, here you are. Now let's see how, when the metal, the foot hits the pedal, are you able to bring this forward? Because this week, as you saw, he had some very important meetings. He had the signing of the new free trade agreement. He had a signing or this China U.S. kind of agreement. But he is a master of smoke and mirrors. So what is this North Node on Saturn is that going to force him to come forward with some good processes and plans? That's where I think some of this is going to come forward.
So you think he'll bring something good?
I think as much, I am not a supporter of Donald Trump, and I'm Canadian, so it doesn't matter what I think of Donald Trump. But I think that Donald Trump has been our the thorn in the political side to make shift happen. And I think I have believed this from the time that he got elected, that shift needed to happen, as painful as it might be. But he is that thorn that makes it go. And I don't know whether with the North Node in Cancer, it never is something for the good. It's more like I told you so in Cancer. It's I told you so, I'm your mother, I told you so, I'm right, you're wrong. You know, that type of thing sometimes. And I think that with Saturn, we might see he might have to be forced to put in some processes versus just words into what's going on, right? Because he's all bluster to me.
Right.
And everybody runs around and tries to do damage control, and then very little gets done behind the scenes. So let's see whether the North Node being there forces things to come to fruition.
Interesting. Well, I didn't do a tri or a quad wheel, but I did do the solar arc and the progressed for that same day. This period, I think it's extremely even more powerful with Pluto being conjunct the South Node, opposing his Saturn, which we could go there as well, and it's also right around a new moon. So, but I'm gonna pull up that chart as well. Let's look at his progress
While
chart.
you're doing that, with Saturn coming to an opposition of his natal Saturn and Pluto being there, it puts enough stressors that a balance has to be hit. And I mean, some people implode, but he's never been anybody to implode. He has declared bankruptcy 11 times. He has been without, where everybody has pulled their funding. He's the type of person that he knows he can always make money. He knows he can always influence people. He's pretty fearless when it comes to things like this. So I don't see those stressors are going to be, they're only going to propel him in a different area to use all of his skill set that he has.
Interesting. Well, thanks, Jeannie. Can we look at, does this work when I switch screens here? Do you now see his progress chart? Or no?
No.
No, just a transit.
Okay, let me see if I can, let's close this one out. Oh, sorry, everyone. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
All right. Let me get back to sharing my screen. So sorry. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Okay. How about now?
Now, yes.
Okay. So this is his progress chart, and Moon is on his, this is for the same moment, more or less, that day. Moon is on his Mars. And I'm just curious if anyone, not just Eugenie, but you've got the stage here a little bit. If you see anything else in this chart, I would love to have pulled up a quad chart. I just didn't have time right before I started this meeting here today. But Uranus kind of right at the midpoint of his North Node and Sun. North Node, progress North Node on his Uranus, kind of switching places there. Anything else you see that might relate to this time?
I'll jump in right now.
Yeah.
You just tell me to keep quiet if you want me to.
No, it's fine.
So if you notice, his progress Sun is at 2 degrees. when his sun changed signs was a major milestone in his life. He was elected, right?
Right. Yep.
And so we're noticing that now. The moon progresses a degree a year. Sorry, moon progresses a degree a month. So he is 4 months away from the moon changing signs. That's also going to be a shift of some sort that's going to happen in his life, because that moon will progress every 2.5 years. So basically, when he was in his primaries and coming up to the election, the moon had just changed signs to Leo. Now he's going to be shifting out of Leo, moon Leo, into moon Virgo. Different perspective on life. And he's not going to, I think that you will see him tone down a little bit, because with the moon in Virgo, it's going to temper just a little bit. But crossing that ascendant, it's all about me. And if I was his astrologer, I would be looking and saying that, number one, he should be looking at health, and he should be making sure that, because of all of this pressure on the ascendant, his health is going to pay, unless he has some sort of offset somewhere along the way. But you can see, we'll see how it goes. I mean, we predicted a lot of things about him, and things don't come around. So
yeah, he does seem to be kind of elusive in that way. When we have predicted things, as a community, many of us, about outcomes, and they haven't necessarily materialized. I think it's, with that moon so tightly on that his progressed moon so tightly on his Mars in Leo, and it's leading up to that between now and next April. It's approaching that, it's applying, and I could see some pretty bravado kind of, not that we don't see it every day to begin with, but in Leo, right on his Mars there, I just think that's it's definitely a signature for heart health as well. Am I right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, his health, and especially moving into Virgo once it crosses his ascendant.
But this is risk taking, right? So he's with this pressure, especially with the progression, and he's going to be taking more risks and not calculated. And then when we look at the transit of Pluto and Saturn in opposition to his natal Saturn, you have to be, when Pluto moved into Capricorn, that's when we had the kind of mini recession, or the recession that hit. It's a writing of things that have been taken advantage of. And Pluto's going to force that. And in opposition, and especially with so many pressures, I would definitely tell him that he has to watch his health, because it doesn't bode well for that many pressures to be in the forefront, especially when he doesn't have a really good outlet for those pressures.
Interesting. Well, this is great. Just for the heck of it, let's pull up his, as long as I don't lose my screen again here, but let's see if I can pull up his solar arc chart. And I know that Frank Clifford is quite a solar arc guy, but I don't think he's with us today. I'm going to lose the screen for a second, and I should get it back in just another second. All right, start share. Okay. So what do we see here? Let's see, I've got a comment here. We have a question. Can everyone hear me? Great, thanks, Sue. couple of questions here I would like to bring up. Marlene, you asked, it seems that sometimes, I think this was at the end of Zeynep's presentation, it seems that sometimes things happen that aren't shown in a natal promise. Can a promise also be in a secondary chart, since it is the unfolding of natal positions? Jeannie or Zeynep, do you have anything to add to that, to answer that?
It is Jeannie, and it's if there can be a promise in the secondary progression, or in when you look at a solar return chart, there is promise there. But if in the birth chart, the promise is not there, you cannot realize it, that specific opportunity. You have to look sideways to see what really is the opportunity that is being presented, because it might be something completely different than if somebody had a situation in a birth promise. For example, the one that I explained about the commitment issues. If they had already worked through the commitment issues in their lifetime, and then this relationship of a lifetime is showing up, they will fall into that and take advantage of it and not have any issues. But if they had not worked through it, even if that relationship of a lifetime presents itself, they still have those commitment issues and will not be able to realize the fullness of the relationship. That doesn't mean that the relationship isn't going to happen, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are missing out on anything. It's what we see as this fullness of the relationship might be just another stepping stone in them to get rid or deal with the commitment issues. So you have to kind of look linearly on how the opportunities present themselves, because there are probably many opportunities in I just did a reading this last weekend of for somebody on their birthday, of course, and I looked at their solar return chart, and it was quite interesting that the promises that we were discussing last year really are going to come into fruition in this year, because this person has definitely worked through a lot of the issues with Scorpio. She had Scorpio on the ascendant for the last year, working through all the issues. Now she's ready, and as these things are moving forward, she sees the world through a different light. Does that help? Hope.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I was waiting to see if Marlene, how she felt about it.
Jeff, I can also answer for perfections.
Yeah.
The basic premise underlying the Time Lord techniques is that not all placements in a person's birth chart are activated at all times. Instead, certain placements lie dormant during the course of a person's life until they become awakened as Time Lords.
Interesting.
Yes.
Can you, Zeynep, can you kind of give us a little bit of a definition when you say Time Lords? I know it's a pretty common terminology in Hellenistic, but I'm curious if you can kind of translate that for us.
It is the ruler of the perfected house.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
For example, if you are 36 years old, then you have first house perfection, and your rising sign is perfected. And for example, if your rising sign is Gemini, then Mercury is your Time Lord for that year.
Okay. So such as this here, we have
yes
36 years old. You pick however old you are, and this is your perfected house.
Yes. These are your ages, and you go one house each year.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yes.
So I am 40.
You are 40.
No, I'm trying to remember how old I am. I'm 43.
40.
I'm sorry, I'm 44. So
44. Then
my
your
ninth house perfected.
ninth house perfection. Yeah.
And then that means that if my ninth house is ruled by Gemini, then my
yes,
perfected ninth
yes,
house is the Lord is Mercury.
yes. But you should look by whole sign.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You are welcome.
Marlene, you said 8th for age 44. Anyway. All right. Mary writes, would Donald Trump be in a first house perfection? Sun is his time lord. Zainab, could you answer that?
Yes, of course. How old is Donald Trump now? Can we open his chart again?
Yeah, let me pull up his chart here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to pull up his solar arc here, but
yes.
So he's
72.
72, yes.
So yes, first house perfection year he's having, and Sun is his year lord. Yes.
Interesting.
Until his next birthday.
Okay, so the graphic that you have here that I have up on the screen, it ends at 71. So the 72 would begin after 60 in the first year.
Yes, of course, the circle will get bigger. Yes.
Great. So it's interesting. So the time lord for him right now in this whole sign, this year of his life is the sun.
Yes.
Gotcha. Great. So I was wondering if we wanted to pull up George H.W. Bush's chart. We have a little bit of time left. We don't necessarily have to adhere to the 1 hour. Give me a moment to pull that up. Let's see. Let's first look at the transits. Jeannie, can I call upon you again to maybe take a few moments to glance at this? Have you looked at this yet? Has anyone else looked at this? Does anyone else have anything they'd like to contribute? It'd be great to have some more discussion.
So I don't do death charts very well. What I have noticed when I've done a death chart is whether they were in the completion of their life or whether it was an accident and not a completion. So you can even see in a child's death chart where a child has passed, but their life has been, even as short as it was a full completion because their soul had completed whatever it came to do in this lifetime.
And how do you see that? Where do you find that?
Normally, I look at what is happening with the outer planets and what aspects they're making in the chart. I also look at Mars and what Mars is doing in the chart at the time of passing. So if there is like a Mars conjunction or a Mars square, normally it indicates to me that the person was not necessarily ready to go at that point in time. With Mr. Bush or President Bush, you can see that his Neptune, Neptune is moving up on Uranus, but look where Uranus is. So it's kind of it's in that 9th house, right? And moving through an area where this is where peace and our beliefs, our spirituality is. I would look at this chart and say he was at total peace at the time of his passing. And
I would add,
go ahead.
It's Donna, that when we look at death charts, in my experience anyway, and I don't do a lot of work with them either, but I'll often pull up the transits. But it seems to me that the impact of death is more significant on the survivors than it is on the person who died. And so we don't always see anything, really significant in the chart of the person who died. And especially when you're talking about somebody who's 94 years old, this was just his time to go. I don't imagine it was a traumatic experience for anyone. I'm sure they were expecting that.
Sure. Yeah. Good point, Donna.
Anyway, that's my 2 bits worth. I don't know that we can always, I know that there are people who make death predictions. But I think for that reason, for the reason that I don't think it impacts the person who is dying, I don't know that we can see so much in the chart. Personally.
No, and I agree with you that I don't know how we could predict. I'm not good at that, and I'm sure that there are other people that might be really good at that. But basically, the way I look at any transit, we have a multitude of people that are born on exactly the same day in the same longitude, latitude position. So their planetary positions are identical. And then you have, when a transit comes along and one person dies, not all of those people are going to die at the same time. So I really haven't really wrapped my head around how somebody could predict a death. And I agree with you that it's the effect on other people that the death has versus the person has passed over and they're happy.
And conversely, when you have major catastrophes happen where thousands or hundreds or whatever the number is of people die, you don't have to look at each of the charts of each of those individuals and see something that happened. It's more of a collective thing. Now, of course, in this chart, that's not the case. But anyway, I think we're digressing a little.
No, that's good, Donna. That's just interesting because I feel like it would be more interesting to look at maybe like Bush's son's chart or his other, Jeb or George W.
That's where I've seen it. That's where I've seen it in the lives of the people who are left behind. Because depending on your belief system, of course, do we really think that George W. Bush is suffering in any way? I would hope not at this point. It wasn't traumatic for him. It was probably a relief. And for that reason, you often see Jupiter transits crossing the ascendant in charts. It's things like that where it's actually they're passing into a better place. It's more Jupiter.
Or their son even, right? I mean, it's kind of the expansion of their soul. They're finally set free.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever that means to you, whatever free means.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'm curious, another example is just my personal experience right now. I have Saturn having just crossed my IC into my 4th house. And I know there's got to be some sort of change going on in the home and the house and everything. And so I'm kind of waiting for it and expecting it. And, of course, sure enough, but back when it crossed there, it swept it. It's just crossed for the final 3rd time and won't go back. But, we got a text over the summer that our landlords want to sell the house. So, of course, there it was. But now we need to decide whether we're buying this house or moving out and buying another one. And I don't know when it's going to happen. But, that kind of, knowing that that's coming is one of those things that, that's just another example of, predictive techniques. But at the same time, it's not really, you don't really see it in my wife's chart. You only see it in mine. You could kind of see it in hers, but, that's what I was getting at, is that depending upon what's going on in a situation, you can maybe see it in one person's chart, but not quite as clearly in another person's chart.
Right. And it might be weighing heavier on you than it is on her.
That's exactly true.
Interesting.
It's far more important for you versus hers. And you're going to take the lead on that.
Interesting, Jeannie. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it is one of those things I do feel more passionate about, kind of feeling like we need to move. And I don't know if it's just because I'm looking at my chart and saying, yeah, the chart says I need to, but but she seems a little indifferent. She could go either way, but
Yeah, so it's more important to you. Whether you make it, whether it's a self-fulfilling prophecy or not is irrelevant.
right. Exactly.
Exactly. And do you not feel that, and I could be wrong, please correct me if you see it differently, but especially in a natal chart, when you look at somebody's natal chart, it's all about their perception of what is going on around them versus what is actually happening. Like, for example, you can see that through a Saturn, it's, the Saturn in the chart is the disciplinarian, and where Saturn is how the child is disciplined. But it's more how that person perceived the disciplinarian in their life versus actually what actually happened. Because somewhere it's all about the perception. So back to your point about that transiting Saturn moving in, it's how you're perceiving it and what makes it so important in your life, where somebody else can say, oh, well, that doesn't bother me, right? It's all about perception. Where's your natal Saturn?
I'm actually having an exact Saturn opposition.
Oh.
At the same time. My Saturn's right on my MC in the 10th. And so it's literally, so there's definitely big shifts happening. Just kind of tapping my fingers, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for it to happen. But it'll come around when it's ready. We're feeling it. I don't want to move in the middle of winter. I live in Maine, so we're kind of waiting till spring.
So is there a technique that you use? Like I know that I swear by the progressed moon. On a monthly basis, I will look to see where my progressed moon is and what my perception of life is going to be and how I'm going to react to certain things. If my progressed moon is going through Pisces, I'm going to be far more emotional in things, so I have to pull myself back. I do not like my progressed moon. I do not like the progressed moon going through Cancer. I have a moon in Pisces. You'd think that would be great, but I find that it makes me more want to butt into other people's business at that time. And so when the progressed moon was, I was just waiting for it to go out of Cancer and just get out of there, because it was constantly on my guard, so I wasn't butting into other people's business that I shouldn't really be butting into. That's what
really
I was finding.
Yeah.
So it was it's intriguing to follow your progressed moon and how you react to the world around you, and those little things that trigger you is through that progressed moon.
Yeah, progressed moon is very interesting. I'm really just, beginning to take notice of my own over the past, year or so. But, another, not to have this whole thing be about me, sorry, but when I was born with a Mercury retrograde in Cancer, and I've lived my entire life, 44 years now, with my progressed Mercury in Cancer. And I think it's next around February, March, April that it's finally going to move out of Cancer into Leo for the first time in my life. So, that's another kind of big shift that, the outer planets in progressed charts, of course, really don't shift much at all. But, those inner planets can really make significant changes in people's lives. So, and with that Mercury moving into Leo might be an addition to the move that we might be making, so.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And they say that when a progressed planet retrograde moves direct, it's like an unleashing of powerful energy that has been stored up, and all of the learnings, whether they're past life learnings or current life learnings, all of a sudden present themselves, and you have end up with a plethora of options to choose from. That comes from Teal, Celeste Teal. She says that.
That's really interesting. I actually, it crossed my mind this summer, and my wife and I were discussing it quite a bit. I started doing some research in our charts for, if you're born with retrograde planets, you can look to see at what point in your life those retrograde planets actually move direct in your progressed chart, and and correspond those with the actual day it happened in your past. So if Mercury went direct when I was you know, let's see, in my progress chart when it went direct back in the 80s, you know, whatever date it was, I can look back in my life at that time and say, you know, what changed, you know, and I did that a little bit, and it was a very interesting exercise to do. It's a little complicated, but it's kind of fun to do that research.
And another, for example, if you're born with a Saturn retrograde, you go through a couple of Saturn returns, because when that Saturn goes direct, it goes back to the place that it was born, and you're still a young child as the Saturn goes direct. So you've got a Saturn return at a young age, then you get a Saturn return at 27 or 28. It's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. We have a question or two. I've been kind of neglecting looking at this. Sorry, everyone. Marlene asked another question to you, Jeannie. Mm-hmm. Thanks for answering about secondary chart natal promises. Have you seen signs in secondary progressions affect health conditions? I seem to recall an article by Lee Lehman where a new health condition was described by the secondary progress sign position, not the natal sign position.
That's exactly true.
Yeah, she doesn't recall if it was sixth house or ruler of the sixth, etc.
It works both. It's sixth house and ruler of the sixth. I can't really recall what she does say, but through secondary progressions, you can see upcoming medical conditions that might show up, and also whether it is, and I call them dis-ease. So this is where your anxieties or nervous conditions can cause an actual physical ailment through secondary progressions, through tensions. You can see those. And I'm really not sure about the houses, but somewhere around the sixth house and also around the 12th.
Interesting. Well, thank you. I'm going to go back a little bit to Amari. Sorry, Amari, it took me a while to get to this. You're just pointing out that Lynn Palmer presents, I think you're referring to Trump's chart with 15 degrees Leo rising in one of her books. This was way before he thought about politics. Maybe you meant to write this was before he thought about politics. Can you, let's see here. So are you saying that, I know that his birth time has been a little controversial. People aren't sure whether it was this or that, etc. I think that this common one is the 29 degree, so we'll just stick with that. But thanks for mentioning it. I see that you just wrote you were just wanted to mention it. Thank you. And Sue, back to the Vedic astrology. She wrote a little while ago, Vedic astrology noticed Jupiter as a primary influence for 13 years back when he was running for office. Okay, so you're referring to Trump. And I don't know what that was in Vedic astrology, but it does seem to be an influence generating some buoyancy. His moon is Sag too, so perhaps that's part of the reason. But if someone knows what the Vedic astrological thing was, that'd be helpful.
Hello, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff, this is Mary.
Hi, Mary.
In Vedic astrology, Trump would have been entering a Jupiter dasa at the time of the election, right around the time of the election, and that is a 13-year period. And so Jupiter would have dominance over that period of his life. But in January, he's entering a sub-period ruled by Saturn. So it will be interesting to see if some of the protection starts to slip.
That's interesting too, that it's ruled by Saturn with, you know, the Pluto and the South Node happening in April there in Capricorn with Saturn in Capricorn. Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Well, everyone, I'm grateful that you all showed up today. And I see Beth, did you raise your hand a while ago? I'm sorry if I didn't call on you. That's not I don't see that too often in these meetings. Maybe it was an accident. Anyway, if anyone has anyone else they'd like to have anything else they'd like to talk about, please let me know. We can go on for a little bit longer if you like. Otherwise, we'll just we'll wrap it up, I think. Leonie, you raised your hand as well. Yes. Sue?
Yeah,
Hi.
I did. Oh,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Oh, you're right, Sue.
No, go ahead,
Oh.
Leonie. We'll start with you.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Look, this is my first time, and I thought, look, I was really excited to jump in. I'm in Australia, so I got up early this morning, and I'm excited. And I really, just wanted to say, yes, I use the annual perfections as well, the Hellenistic technique. And as you were just saying, which was interesting about the progressions, and how when we can look back and see the events that happen when a planet goes direct, after, if you're born in a retrograde, and the new moon returns, things like that.
Yeah.
An example, say for me, was 13 days after I was born, Mercury went direct on the same day Saturn stationed direct. And yeah, it was quite a hard time for me. My parents went through divorce that year. I dropped out of school. Everything just went to crap. And it's really, you can really look back. If you know yourself better than anyone, and to go back and have a look at, those things, you can really, find something significant in somebody else's chart.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's really interesting, Leonie. Thank you for contributing your story. That's exactly what I was referring to earlier, because I was born with about 3 or 4 planets retrograde in my chart, and of course,
yes,
one of them might not go direct until I'm 79, but Mercury went direct in my teens, I believe. I don't remember exactly, but I looked at my wife's chart, and we just really tried to pinpoint the exact day. I mean, you get an ephemeris, you can figure that out.
Yes.
And look back at those points in your life to see what kinds of big shifts were happening, etc. And I think it's a great exercise for everyone to do. Indeed.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
It is fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for waking up early in Australia.
Thank you.
Sue, did you want to say something?
Sure. Hi. And it was about the death chart, because I find death charts fascinating. And it is, from what I understand, I mean, I've listened to Maurice talk about them, but I've also been fascinated before that. And it is so much that often it is their personal voyage, you might say, provide into the next realm. And so if you look, which has a lot to do with Jupiter, but I've been studying his whole chart, and there's so many indications that speak to me about how he may have died. And for myself, as far as predictions, I would say it's mostly hindsight, 20/20 vision. It's not always, I don't necessarily have the need to project how a person, when they might die. But looking at his chart, just looking at Jupiter right off the bat, he is approaching that Saturn return. And of course, because it's Jupiter and the Sun, you could say it's rather conjunct. But there's so many other indications. I mean, at that transit time, the nodes were squared by the opposition of Venus and Uranus. And Venus in its own sign, Libra, is quite significant because it is conjunct, 4-degree orb, you could say. I mean, I'm pretty liberal with mine, but to Saturn. And Saturn there is, therefore Saturn, in a sense, would be at, also square the transiting nodes. That's just one indication. And then you could look at the moon. The transiting moon is square his natal sun, rather. There's so many elements that one could go in there to see perhaps why that was a moment that he, his life, the way I see it, chose to release and go, further it's for me, it's such an exploratory terms, like why does a person choose to rebirth? In a sense, a spiritual advancement, you know.
Sure, sure. Yeah, Sue, thank you. And yeah, I've noticed the Mercury opposition as well.
Exactly. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, that was another one.
Kind of squaring the angles of this chart as well.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Sue.
Jeff? Jeff, you're muted. We're not hearing anything.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just, thank you. My apologies. Oh gosh. Well, I was just saying thank you for, participating, everyone that participated. Thank you for joining us, everyone who joined us. We're going to hopefully have another one of these sooner than we did this time. And, this is a community discussion room. So, love to have as much participation as possible. We can run this a little longer if we need to next time. But anyway, thank you everybody for coming along and listening in here. Hopefully you got some good tips and some ideas out of this and learned some things. I sure did, that's for sure. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope everyone has a great holidays this year, and those of you who may celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah starting tonight. So
Awesome.
yeah, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.